In the lifetime of any person currently living, including Dick Van Dyke, there has never been a time when a major U.S. political party has been more intellectually incoherent, more emotionally incontinent, more completely and totally unhinged than today's Democrats are, along with their enablers in the fake news media, but it's almost pointless even making that distinction anymore. We talked a bit on Wednesday about how discomfiting it must be for the Dems having Elon Musk take over Twitter, which was formerly their most reliable propaganda tool, a core ingredient in their yummy porridge of election rigging, and worse yet, having it happen a week and a half before a midterm election in which they were likely going to get slaughtered anyway. Let's call things what they are. It has broken their brains. They are saying things now that no person should be able to say with a straight face. They are saying things that you couldn't parodize or satirize even if you wanted to, because the original version already exists at a level of peak absurdity. And it must have been especially painful this past Wednesday afternoon when, in the worst of all possible eventualities, Joe Biden got fact-checked on Twitter. Now, Joe Biden getting fact-checked on Twitter is a monument to awesomeness that can and should stand on its own considerable merit, far beyond our feeble ability to add or detract from it. And it's always a good day when you can steal a line from Abraham Lincoln. Now, Joe Biden, or more accurately, whoever the purple-haired, lip-pierced, eyeshadow-wearing man in a dress it is who runs the White House Twitter account, decided it would be a good idea to brag about the fact that, look, everybody's Social Security checks are about to get bigger. Now, whoever wrote this missive, and yes, you may have noticed that I really hate the word tweet and I endeavor to avoid using it whenever feasible, they probably thought this one was a layup. Social Security checks are going to get bigger? That sounds just like the sort of thing that my boss, the beleaguered president with the mid-30s approval rating, should claim credit for. So the tweet goes out, and it sits there for an hour, and it sits there for another hour, and then, what's this? Click here for more context? Not for my president, my Democrat president? You can't do that, Elon Musk, you super duper ultra mega maga monster, you! This fact check is violence. This fact check could get people of color killed in the LGBT community. You know that famous video clip of Vladimir Putin where he just starts busting up, laughing his ass off? I bet that's what Elon did when he decided to drop that fact check on Joe Biden. Like it was his fun, unspoken way of saying, okay, Joe, let's see how you like being the president and having your public statements vetted by some internet company. Trump, he used to get every single one of his tweets fact-checked, even when he was stating verifiably true facts about the world. So let's see how you like having context added to this extremely dubious claim that you have made here. And the fact check, I don't need to tell you what it said. You already know why the claim is horseshit. It's horseshit because Social Security benefits have been tied to the rate of inflation since 1972. In other words, Joe Biden tried to brag about something that only happened because he is a terrible president who wrecked the economy, who apparently wants his tombstone to say, "Hi, I'm the guy who turned the United States into the Weimar Republic, and I still had over a year left in my term. Also, as long as you're here, I may be buried 6 feet under the ground right now, but I still wouldn't mind sniffing your daughter's hair if you could convince her to lean down here nice and close. No serious guys until you're 30, sweetheart." From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where I am pleased to see YouTube has allowed you to take a break from watching Spanish-language dish soaps commercials. Am I the only one seeing those? Is it some practical joke they're playing on me? Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. And the current rhetoric that's coming out of the depraved cesspool known as the media Democrat industrial complex, there almost is no point in me trying to describe just how freaking crazy it is. I know a hell of a lot of adjectives, more than most people, or so I like to think, but I don't think I know one that does justice to what we are seeing this week. For Christ's sake, we have got presidential historians going on NBC saying Republicans are going to murder your children if they win a majority in the House of Representatives. We've got the President of the United States, such as he is, doubling down on his message that democracy will die unless his party the one that doubled your household expenses, threw your kids out of school, compelled you to get mandatory injections as a condition of keeping your job, and forced you to wear a goddamn stupid religious face covering for 2 years, wins every election forever. Now, as near as I can follow it, Mr. Biden's argument seems to be that American democracy cannot survive unless we have permanent one-party rule? And we simply have never heard rhetoric of this sort from either party prior to any election in recent memory, and much less a midterm election. So what changed? What caused the Democrats and their media sycophants to reach such depths of demagoguery that they can't even bring themselves to contemplate living in a world where the opposition party might occasionally control one of the branches of government? Well, the obvious answer, of course, the answer you probably would hear from any Democrat or any fake news performance artist for that matter, is to say Trump did it. That Donald Trump is such a uniquely loathsome individual, so dangerous to the survival of our sacred institutions, that there is a moral duty to prevent him from regaining power and to keep all those who support him also from gaining power. But that's not what did it. As Trump himself often points out, I'm the one they attack. But it's you they really hate, and he is right about that. When the American people chose Donald Trump to be their president, they did a thing that wasn't supposed to be possible. They installed a guy in the presidency over the strenuous objections of the news media and the Washington establishment. You remember 2015, don't you? When all the smarmy late-night comedians were literally begging Trump to run for president because they thought it would be nothing but a big joke, a source of low-hanging fruit that they could use for night after night of hilarious monologues. So he does it. He runs. He comes down the escalator in June. He announces his candidacy. And the news media and the late-night comics, well, they're all delighted. They think it's the best thing that ever happened. These Donald Trump jokes, they practically write themselves. And you will recall also that there wasn't a single person on television at this stage of the game who was calling Trump a racist or a xenophobe or a right-wing extremist or any of that. But then a strange thing happened. The voters at the rallies started looking past the Trump persona and listening to what the candidate was actually saying. And they heard a lot of things that they agreed with. They heard a lot of things that made good common sense, but which nobody in either party ever seemed to say anymore. And so, slowly but surely, even though everybody on television still thought he was a joke candidate who existed just for their comedic purposes, Trump became a serious candidate with a legitimate chance of becoming the Republican nominee. So the calendar flips to 2016, the fake news personalities and the late-night comics. All of a sudden, it sounds like they are talking about a completely different guy altogether. This is when you first start hearing the cries of Trump is racist and Trump hates immigrants, because Democrats and fake news types, but I repeat myself, don't know how to respond to perceived political threats except by spurious accusations of racial prejudice, but you know that already. You see, when the Republicans were behaving the way they are supposed to behave, and only nominating reliably squishy globalist neoliberal candidates like the two George Bushes and John McCain and Willard Romney, Pierre Delecto to his friends, over on the other side, they got themselves lulled into a false sense of security about the way the world actually works. They began thinking there was no way that any major party candidate could make it all the way to a presidential election without their approval. Sure, we're willing to share power with Republicans, they said, as long as they agree with us on 80% of everything and always let us have our way when it comes right down to it. As long as they don't present an obstacle in any meaningful way to our globalist neoliberal project, then sure, we'll pretend to be pluralists, we'll pretend to be big fans of democracy who accept the stated will of the voters, even though we really aren't, but we'll pretend just the same. But then Trump comes along. Like the bull in the china shop that we hired him to be, and he says, nah, fuck that. I'm not going to mince words about the fact that the news media are fake as hell. I'm not going to mince words about the fact that these two major parties have largely been just two tentacles on the same octopus of awfulness for the last 30 years or more. If I make it to the White House, it is going to be without kissing CNN's ass, and I'm going to continue telling the people what I really think, no matter how many times you sleazy fake news jackasses clutch your pearls and call me a racist. The news media types were very deeply offended when Trump duly became the Republican nominee because voters are not supposed to choose nominees over the objection of the news media establishment. That is not supposed to be a thing that is possible. When we make it clear that we don't approve of a candidate, voters are supposed to reject that person. Do they not know the rules? That's the way it's worked for decades now. We are supposed to have veto power over this stuff, goddammit. Has the whole world gone mad? And you remember what happened after that. What the general election campaign looked like. You don't need me to remind you. But I felt like the glorious crowning apogee of that whole phenomenon happened on the night of the first debate, when Anderson Cooper attempted to refuse starting the proceedings until Trump had admitted to being a rapist. The fake news media, they spent that entire year covering themselves in glory, as you know, but for me, I think there is still no moment that tops that one, frankly. Journalism does not work when the journalists view themselves as part of a ruling class. And if you're looking for a simple explanation of how the news media became the embarrassing fake clown show it is now, that's probably it. People used to become journalists because they had a passion for the business, because they were good at writing and had the skills to be a decent reporter. If you go back 40 or 50 or 60 years and look at the group of people who were the country's most prominent national newsmen at the time, most or all of them didn't have any college education and got into the business as teenagers, writing for their local newspaper in wherever it was they lived. Today, the prominent figures in our news media, such as they are, they come from the same private school Ivy League pipeline that produces nearly all of our political leaders. You can make an 8-figure salary just hosting some dumb, stupid, vapid morning show. And worst of all, we've lost any separation between the worlds of government, academia, and journalism. They are all the same world now. There is a professional revolving door between all three, and that is an extremely serious problem. When the whole purpose of your profession, ostensibly, is to tell the truth and hold powerful people's feet to the fire, that purpose becomes exceedingly more difficult to achieve when the people you're reporting on are your friends and colleagues, and they are just as powerful and affluent as you are, when everybody in the dance is only concerned with maintaining their station and not losing their seat on the gravy train. The relationship between government and the press is supposed to be an adversarial one. There is not supposed to be any mutual trust in that relationship. Government officials and the reporters who cover them should never, ever, ever be going out for drinks together after work. But that's what happens every day in today's Washington, and the biggest casualty in a world like that is self-awareness. Self-awareness is impossible to achieve when you and all the people you regularly interact with come from exactly the same educational background, have exactly the same beliefs, the same socioeconomic station, and most crucially, the same desire not to upset the status quo and risk losing one's position. Pretty much everybody knows that Trump toyed with the idea of running for president for many years before he actually got down to it, but it was never set in stone that he was going to run as a Republican. He wasn't even registered as a Republican between 1999 and 2012. He was in the Reform Party, then he was a Democrat for a while, then he was an independent, and when he considered running for president, over the years, from time to time, he considered running as a Democrat just as often as he considered running for a Republican. As a Republican, or even something else. And there's nothing particularly shocking about that when you look at his actual platform. The whole reason he was an effective candidate was because he didn't adhere to either party's orthodoxy. He trashed the GOP nearly as often as he trashed the Democrats because they both damn well deserve it. And people noticed. And it earned him credibility, just like they noticed the fact that he was trafficking in sensible ideas that have broad-based appeal. But the news media types, they never give it that much thought. They couldn't get past. They still haven't got past. They will never get past. They're butthurt over the fact that the voters elected a president over their objections. And the Dems, they will never get their heads around the fact that they lost to Donald Trump in a free and fair election. But then the Democrats are weird like that. Each time they get into power, they act like they are going to be in power permanently until the end of time, that they are somehow the rightful winners of every election. And if a different outcome should happen, it can never be because the voters rejected them and their batshit crazy policies. No, it has to be Russian collusion or voter suppression or some other pet phrase that you can just vomit out to account for your own failures when you're not feeling in a very self-reflective mood at the moment. And speaking of the dreaded voter suppression, we talked briefly on Wednesday about how, just as we all knew was going to happen, the stupid ballot drop boxes, the ones that were supposed to be just a temporary public health measure for 2020 only, well, they seem to mostly still be all around, which, what a shocking development that is. I thought that these people's intentions were 100% noble and I could take them at their word. I thought they just wanted people to be healthy and safe, and look at how they double-crossed me. So do you remember the big freak out last year over the Georgia voter integrity law? You know, the law that supposedly was such a monstrous affront to minority voting rights that Major League Baseball pulled the All-Star game out of Atlanta, and Disney had to issue some performatively outraged press release, and every corporate virtue-signaling douchebag in the whole Twitterverse had to jump on the bandwagon about how bad and terrible and terrible and bad and racist and awful this law was. Remember Jim Crow 2.0? Remember Jim Eagle? Of course we remember Jim Eagle, because he's the best producer in the business. Here's the thing about that Georgia law. All it ever did was to end the temporary measures that were supposed to be just for 2020. And I think Georgia was the only state that actually got around to doing that, like every other state was supposed to do. And look at the freak out it caused. But no person was denied their voting rights. There is no right to drop your ballot in a cardboard box on a sidewalk at a strip mall in the middle of the night. You have the right to vote at your designated polling place on election day with a valid photo ID. If there is a compelling reason why you require an absentee ballot, you may request one. Anything beyond that? Stop pretending you are arguing for voting rights. You are not. You are arguing for convenience because you think it benefits your side if voting requires no more exertion than buying a lottery ticket. And if you want to make an argument about voter suppression, then do feel free to please show me one voter anywhere who has actually been deprived of the opportunity to vote in the legally prescribed manner. But you won't because you can't, because voter suppression doesn't freaking exist. Voter punishment exists, though. In fact, I would submit that much of what we have seen these past 2 years, and many of the antics that we're currently seeing, has its origins in a desire to punish the people of the country for overruling the establishment and putting Donald Trump in the White House. Oh, you want to build a wall? Well, say hello to your 5 million new illegal alien neighbors. Oh, you like energy independence? Well, say hello to $6 for a gallon of gas. Oh, you like sensible foreign policy? Say hello to your new proxy war with Russia. Oh, you like freedom? Say hello to forced injections and mandatory religious face coverings. Oh, you like your daughter? Say hello to your son. And that's just about all I've got for this week. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Here is wishing everybody a delightful, edifying weekend with those you love. I will see you Monday for a very special midterm eve edition of the program. I don't know exactly what's going to be very special about it. It just seemed like something to say. That is it from me. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.